Inch by inch, row by row, gonna make this garden grow. All it takes is a rake and a hoe and a piece of fertile ground. Inch by inch, row by row, someone bless these seeds I sow. Someone warn them from below till the rain comes tumbling down. Till the rain comes tumbling down. Till the rain comes tumbling down.
Good evening and welcome. I am Terry Kay of the Jewish Grandparents Network. Thank you for joining us tonight for The Art of Becoming, Finding Creativity, Meaning, and Identity as Grandparents. We so appreciate that you made the time to join us. First, a big thank you to Sarah Reed, our JGN colleague who is helping facilitate. Sarah has shared with us in chat how to turn on captions for those who wish to use that feature. We are thrilled, delighted, overjoyed to welcome our friends from Shul, Naomi Less and Ben Freeman, to lead us tonight. So a brief introduction to Naomi and Ben. Naomi Less is a Brooklyn-based, internationally celebrated singer, composer, musician, ritual leader, and educator. Naomi is a co-founder of Storytelling and of Shul, where she currently serves as associate director and ritual leader. Her original music is sung in worship communities worldwide. Ben Freeman is a multidisciplinary artist, educator, and spiritual care provider. At Shul, Ben designs curriculum for and facilitates cohorts of Generate, Shul's rite of passage for older adults contemplating the spiritual qualities of elderhood. Also, Passage, an adult B-Mitzvah program, and Raising the Bar, Shul's reimagined B-Mitzvah for teens. May I turn it back to you, and thank you, Ben and Naomi, for that beautiful introduction. Over to you.
Thank you, Terry. It's such a gift to get to be here with you and with all of you that we are so thrilled to get to meet in the way that we can over Zoom over the course of this next hour and a half. So we are here tonight contemplating the art of becoming, what it might mean to find creativity, meaning, and a deeper sense of identity in your role as grandparents. And they often say, you know, where you should start is at the very beginning, a very good place to start. And I want to share one place to start with us tonight, which is a story from the Talmud. Sarah is going to put up those slides in just a second. And while we dive into a story from the Talmud, I want to invite you to consider that this is, the Talmud is really a collection of a bunch of people across centuries wrestling with what does it mean to be human and how should we live? And whether you are deeply, deeply schooled in the art of reading Talmud or you've never experienced it before, great, you're welcome here with all of your experiences, because you too are part of this ongoing intergenerational chain of meaning makers trying to make sense of how to be human in the world we live in. So, once upon a time, in ancient times, there was a man named Honi, the circle maker. During times of drought, he was known for his ability through prayer and arguing with the divine to have rain descend on the land. He was wise, and in that wisdom asked questions when something puzzled him. One day, Honi was out for a walk and saw a woman planting a carob tree. He asked her, "How long will it take for that seedling to mature and bear fruit?" "About 70 years, I believe," answered the woman. "But you are old and may never see that fruit grow to its full ripeness." Maybe not," replied the woman, "but I have enjoyed the fruit from trees planted by those who lived here before me, who took great care to plant seeds with the belief that the fruit would grow and ripen. I am planting seeds today so that those who come after me will see the fruits ripen and serve the world. And I hope that they do the same for the next generation. Take a moment just to consider where that story is landing with you at this exact moment on Wednesday, February 26th. And by way of introducing ourselves, we'll just share briefly a little bit of where it lands for us and why we chose to begin here. So Naomi, I wonder if you would lead us into that.
Sure. And one of the pieces of my portfolio is really working with our Bar Mitzvah students who are, and their families, their parents, and oftentimes their grandparents who are considering the passing of story, literally the tree of life passing one generation to the next. And to me, trees are at the center of Judaism. And to me, the trees offering, I mean, if you know the giving tree, famous story, the giving tree, et cetera, trees are consistently offering us opportunities to connect to our own humanity as well too. So to me, this story, the tree is actually the star of this story, not Honi and not the woman, because the tree is going to be the connective tissue between the generations. And to me, I was like, well, what are our trees? What is our connective tissue? What do we want to pass forward? What was passed to us? And what trees were gathered? Were we gathering these carob fruits from the different trees from the generation? So I think the tree was the centerpiece for me in this story.
For sure. And in some of the work that I do at Lab Shul, which by the way, we should probably say what Lab Shul is because we haven't yet.
Yes, absolutely.
Lab Shul is an experimental, artist-driven, everybody-friendly, God-optional community for sacred Jewish gatherings based here in New York City, but reaching the world. And in some of the work that I feel very privileged to get to do at Lab Shul, as Terry mentioned, I run cohorts of a program called Generate, where we invite small cohorts of adults 60-ish and above who are contemplating what it means to age wisely, generatively, and soulfully. Some of those folks are grandparents, just like many of you. And one of the things that they are often contemplating as they move through a year with us in that rite of passage program is, what is my legacy? And what's within my control and what's not within my control as I contemplate my place in a rapidly changing, not only Jewish environment, but environment of the whole world. And so between our 2 feet in those 2 programs, we knew that was really how this evening came to be. So we wanted to start there to invite you into a question of legacy, which is really central to our time tonight.
So take a breath. We don't have to, the expression, do the whole Megillah tonight, if that tracks for anybody. Purim is coming up. We're just about to start Adar, a new Jewish month. But we're going to spend some time together contemplating a couple of different goals and also utilizing a few different methods. One of the things we're going to be doing is exploring Jewish values and the ways in which our values, our Jewish values, and also universal values, which here's the big punchline, oftentimes are Jewish values too. So how these values and actions were actually transmitted to you and what took root. What did you grab hold of? What do you remember being passed to you in different kinds of ways? And what actually took root, just like that tree. And we're going to begin a process of identifying some of those values and then prioritizing, sort of mapping our lives and the ways in which we have connections to our grandchildren. I don't have grandchildren, but I'm saying the royal we, but the ways that we have access to our grandchildren in different kinds of activities or places in their life, and identifying and prioritizing some of the values and how we want to transmit those to our grandchildren. And we're going to do this through a few different modalities. We're going to do what we're calling a little guided excavation, dusting off some of those memories. We're going to do some mapping. we're going to do a little journaling. So I invite you, you may want to have like a piece of paper nearby, nothing major, scrap paper, just something to jot some notes down. And we're also going to have some conversation amongst yourselves. We're going to break out into some small groups to have some beautiful conversation. And then by the end of our time together, you will leave here with some clear, actionable steps that you can take. We'll do this in an hour. Good luck. The chat is always available. I know Terry has her finger on the chat too, so she may be able to respond quicker than Ben or I in the chat as well. But if you have questions or need support, please access the chat. Yeah. All right. So are we ready? Can I get some thumbs up if we're ready to embark on this journey? Awesome. Okay. Wonderful.
All right. So let's take a moment to dive back into memory. If you would, I invite you to just roll your shoulders back and notice the points of contact between your body and what is supporting you. And notice contact between your feet and the floor. And I invite you to call to mind a specific moment when a grandparent of yours taught you about your tradition. Call to mind a specific moment, a memory of when a grandparent of yours taught you something about your tradition. It may be that this is Jewish tradition specifically, or depending on what your family background is, there might be another one that swims to the surface. But a moment when a grandparent taught you where you come from and who you belong to. Maybe it was on a visit from them to your home. Maybe you were visiting their home. Maybe it had to do with a holiday. Maybe it was something in the way you saw them act in the world, or a value that they shared was important to them. And I wonder if we could just get a few quick responses. You can put them in the chat, or if you would like to unmute, we have time just to hear a few, but we'd love to hear a few moments of your grandparents and when they taught you about your tradition.
And as you're thinking about it, I'll start just with, even though I'm not a grandparent, I'll just start with a memory that comes to mind was actually being sent a picture. My grandfather and grandmother, when my childhood, lived far away from me. And they sent a picture of my grandfather at his synagogue holding the Torah, dancing for Simchat Torah. And I never thought of my grandparents as synagogue goers. And that was like a cementing moment of like, there is joy in tradition. And actually, my grandfather really honored and valued the Torah, which was a new revelation for me. And that has passed forward to my child.
We're seeing that for some people, lighting Shabbat candlesticks, hospitality, and welcoming guests into their home. There are some folks that did not, thank you for saying that. There are some folks that did not get to know their grandparents, and it's important to note that as well. And we are, for those of us perhaps that did not get to meet our own grandparents, we may have enjoyed watching our own kids with their grandparents as well.
We also invite, if you have reflections about a parent memory, that is welcome here as well too. An elder in your life that somehow has passed on some that you remember, you have a memory of them passing on some sort of core value or Jewish value.
Lots of holiday memories coming into the chat. Memories connected to specific ritual items like a Havdalah set.
Music, tunes.
I also saw something above about differences in language. So for some of us with our own elders, whether grandparents or other elders, we may not have been able to communicate in an easy way. And perhaps that prompted us to find other ways of connecting. I see also one hand up from Cheryl. So let's take Cheryl and Yvonne, and then we're going to move on for this moment. So yeah, Cheryl.
My mother and father decided that since they came from non-religious, non-observant families, we were going to begin the practice of observing Shabbat in our home. And my mother wanted to combine it with her feminist values. So she would recite, or she would have my father recite the Woman of Worth prayer as part of our Shabbat ceremony. And she changed the words at the end to be a woman who honors herself. She shall be praised. It made a big point to me that my mother felt Judaism and feminism could be combined together.
Beautiful, powerful.
Thank you. And I saw one more hand from Yvonne.
Yes. My grandparents and parents were Holocaust survivors. They came after the war from Hungary to Uruguay. That's where me and my brother were born in South America. So we had the 4 grandparents. We were very, very lucky to have met our 4 grandparents. They only spoke Hungarian. So my most vivid memories is first, my maternal grandfather just putting his hands in us, the children. I think that was in Yom Kippur when he did the blessing. Very, very quietly. We never understood what he was talking about because, of course, he didn't speak Spanish, only Hungarian and Yiddish, and this was this culture environment that we grew, being our first language Hungarian in South America, really. So that's from the side of my mother. From the side of my father, my most vivid memory is my grandfather and my grandmother having all their prayers at the Yom Kippur celebrations, whatever, not at temple and not with us, but in their own home. Because there's a whole story that he was a little bit excommunicated in the Uruguayan Jewish community for, something very cruel, because he had done something in Hungary, converted the family to Protestant. So there's a whole story, so much, because I lived and I had them until I was pretty old. I was very lucky. So I have a lot of memories from my grandparents. Being survivors was, I think, and also my parents, I think what really was transmitted to me most powerful. Their survivor story, their Holocaust, their Hungary story. So many different sides of their Judaism that really made me who I am today, so from the memories to forming me, really.
Thank you, Yvonne. That's beautifully stated. And it's a perfect moment to consider whatever memories may have come to mind for you, by virtue of being here on this call and being a Jewish grandparent, you are now in that role of transmitting the memories, the legacy, and a sense of self, as you just said, Yvonne, that the way that they brought themselves and their story to you shaped who you are. And that's the role that you are all in now. So take a moment to just consider, whoa, how does that feel? And maybe just show on your face for a moment, like, what does it feel like to be in that role of the grandparent now?
See some nodding.
Yeah. It's a big responsibility. Yeah. It is.
Yeah. And so in that sense of, again, either if it was a specific value or memory, and by the way, Jewish, or secular values here are truly welcome, of things that were passed on to you. We're going to go into a little bit of a kind of priming your brain pumps here to see who we have in the room. And we're just going to take some visual voting here. So if you are off screen and you can turn your camera on, we'd love to see your faces on this, because we want to be able to see your hands here. I'm going to ask you a few questions, and I want you to raise your hand as I ask these questions. So raise your hand if you feel excited about something that was passed to you that you might in turn want to pass on to your grandkid. So the thing that was passed to you, you want to pass on to to them. Wow, a lot of hands there. I'm just scrolling through the pages. Yep.
Yeah.
A lot of hands. Okay, please put your hands down. I want you to see this for yourselves too. Feel free to scroll through the pages if you're able to.
Naomi, can I jump in to say that if you want to see your whole screen, you might want to, if you're on speaker view, you might want to switch at the top right to gallery view so you can see everyone.
Well instructed, Terry. Thank you. Okay, next question. Raise your hand if you feel some sense of urgency around passing on tradition. Okay, Terry just put up 2 hands. I'm just going to name that for the record. And so did, wow, we have a number of people who are certainly feeling a level of urgency for multiple reasons, I imagine, whether it's within your own life or on behalf of the Jewish community or what have you. But there is, that temperature check was potent. Okay, so you can put your hands down now. Just a couple more questions. How many of you wonder, raise your hand if you wonder whether you're doing enough to pass on values or if you're doing it effectively? So raise your hand if you are wondering if you are actually being effective at passing on these values. Okay, so there's, a number of you are raising your hand, right? Okay. You're not alone. And put your hands down. How many of you, raise your hand if you feel frustrated, any sense of frustration that your grandchildren may not be receiving the type of values or tradition you may have wanted them to receive? Okay, let's out ourselves a little bit here. Okay, so some of you feel that way. Okay. Thank you for raising your hands. Again, just seeing that you're not alone in this. And last question I'll ask you, how many of you, raise your hand if you have already consciously begun the work of passing down a value or tradition of yours? Okay, great. So you're already in this. That's wonderful. So what we're here to do is really to help you move the dial from where you are to a next step. And the way we're going to do this is through a little bit of mapping, of scanning your environment for a moment. That'll be like our next step in this. So you're welcome to put your hands down or remove your hand raise. And Ben's going to take us through this next exercise.
Great. So this is a moment, if you have that paper and pen next to you, this is a good moment to get it out. And Sarah is going to put up a slide. And you'll see 4 quadrants on the slide. It's the next one.
Beautiful.
So you'll see 4 quadrants. And if it's helpful to you to map that out on your paper, you can map it out in 4 quadrants. You can also just make 4 lists. But what we are mapping at this moment is what we are already doing, what we're already doing in our relationship with our grandchildren. And we're reflecting in 4 categories. What we make together, whether it's art projects or food or moments of sacredness, perhaps, what we make together with our grandchildren, how we show them who we are as Jewish grandparents, which might include what we wear, what's observable in our house. Are there Shabbat candlesticks out in the house, for instance, or pictures of family members? What we say, how we explicitly make known to them aspects of our Jewish tradition that we wish for them to know through what we say, and what we do, how we act in the world. Perhaps, for instance, we honor certain volunteer commitments, and for us, that's really important and grounded in a sense of Jewish values, for instance, so how they see us act in the world. So I'd like to invite you to take a moment. I'm going to sort of move us through those 4 categories just a little bit more slowly, and take a few notes of what's coming up for you as things you're already doing in your relationship with your grandchildren. So what are you already making together with your grandchildren? Again, food, art projects, and how are those perhaps expressions of Jewishness, Jewish culture, Jewish tradition? What are you making in your time together with your grandchildren?
making also could be intangible, like making music, you know, things like that. So think expansively about that.
Do you want us to put this in chat, Ben and Naomi? But do you want us to just hold on to it?
Yeah, just write it for yourselves is
Okay.
sort of your opening. This is going to be sort of your map and your list, and try to be as specific as possible. Point to, you know, if you wrote something like holidays, like what specifically within that holiday are you making together? So be as specific as you can with yourself. There's no need to put it in the chat.
I'll move us to that second category, show. So how are you showing your tradition, your culture in the way you are wearing clothes or jewelry, for instance? Is there a Jewish star, a Star of David around your neck? What are you showing in your house that connects with Jewish culture and tradition? Again, are there family mementos that are particularly connected that your grandchildren are seeing regularly? Are there other visible signs? Is there a mezuzah on your door? And have you, well, you don't have to have taken a moment yet actually with them to talk about the mezuzah, but if it's there, it's there. That's something you're showing that you could make an explicit conversation with them about. So what are you already showing and how are you showing?
Including values that you have that are outward signs, bumper stickers on your car, you know, think expansively again about what does showing your values look like.
In the domain of what you say, are there specific stories you are already telling your grandchildren about your own family, about your own experience navigating the world Jewishly? Are you explicitly trying to pass on some lessons and saying, I have something I really want to teach you. I'm going to tell you in words why this is so important to me? Are there songs you're singing together that are connected to culture or tradition that you'd like to hand down?
Bedtime rituals.
Mm-hmm. And finally, in the realm of doing, what are you doing? How are you acting in the world that illustrates the values that are most important to you? Again, are you volunteering? Are you engaging in philanthropic giving? Is it simply just a way that you try to hold yourself when walking down the street and interacting with a stranger with a quality of chesed, of loving kindness and openness? What are you already doing? How are you already acting in the world that shows your grandchildren who you are and what you want them to know about the traditions that you're trying to hand down? And there's some great conversations that are already opening up in the chat. I'm seeing there's a sort of thread that's happening, getting to some questions of what do I do if the way that I'm trying to be, I'm in a situation of conflict with someone in my family, or there's just a different way of observing and thinking about this. There's going to be a moment in maybe 20 minutes from now where we do a little bit of coaching and thinking through some of those questions. So for those of you that may be having real thorny questions coming up, we're going to have some time to get into that.
So what we're going to do right now is do a little bit of sharing with each other of some of these things that you've written down to celebrate and to also get other ideas as you map what you're already doing, and not to be like Pollyannish, like, you know, that there's not work to be done, but to celebrate and land on the work that you've already done. So we're going to go into some breakout rooms, and some of you may have done breakout. Raise your hand if you've ever been in a breakout room on a Zoom call before. Okay, we got some veterans. Great. So you're going to see in a moment an invitation on your screen pop up. And what we'd like to invite you to do, and we will put this, maybe Terry, we could even put this in the chat, is to share right now before people break out, is to share one way, share one thing, one way in which you're already transmitting tradition and values to your grandkid or grandchildren. So you'll have about 3 people in your group, just enough time for each person to share one way in which, and to celebrate each other, thumbs up, get ideas, you know, use each other for inspiration. We'll have just about 6 minutes or so. So really like 2 minutes per person. Do your math and make sure that there's equity of time for everyone. And then we'll invite you back in. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I know it was, you were just getting into it, right? And then we were horrible people that made you come back into this big room. We're sorry. There's, as Willy Wonka says, there's so little to do and so much time. Reverse that. So much to do, so little time. Right. That's a Gene Wilder quote from Willy Wonka.
And we see, and if you look in chat, one of our participants asked, is it possible to talk with our breakout friends? So they may want to continue the conversation. So you can private message each other in chat and set a time.
That's right.
Wonderful.
There's a little blue bar in the chat. And if you click it, you can find the name of your friend that you made and send them a little message and thank them for a delicious conversation. So I don't know if anybody wants to share in the chat. Maybe there's something that you want to share of what's that one thing that you shared with your group. You could pop it in the chat and then more people can see what is it that you're already teaching to your grandchildren or grandkid.
I'm excited to see these responses come in. PJ Library Books.
Love it.
What else? Chala. Great resources through the Jewish Grandparents Network.
Hamantashen coming up. If anybody has a good gluten-free recipe, I'm into it. Oh, look at this.
Host Shabbat dinner.
Wow. Teaching Hebrew on Zoom.
Volunteering.
Volunteering, yes.
Beautiful.
My head is down here because I've got the chat on my phone. So I'm just reading these here. I'm not ignoring everybody. But, beautiful. Well, I want to share with you that what you are doing is truly, truly, truly rooted in the core central, get in here, Ben, I can't even see you. What you're doing is truly rooted in the core and central concept that of Judaism, like smack in the middle of the Torah. And I want to share with you a short piece of Torah text that may be very familiar to many of you and maybe new to some of you. And it's something that you may not have thought about in this context, which is a piece of text from Torah that is called the V'ahavta. It's said in worship rituals after the Shema. It's one of 3 pieces of Torah text that are said after the Shema. And this first piece of text talks about love, which is key. It's the central commandment in our Torah is to love God optional, divine presence, love being alive, and also to love your neighbor as yourself. Those are sort of like the 2 main love commandments. But if you dig into this text here, which is something that if you are a regularly praying Jew, you say this twice a day, and morning and night. So it is something that I like sing to my daughter almost every night. So it for some people, this is something that becomes rote, and I want to examine it with fresh eyes tonight. So you'll see I'm just going to focus on, I'm going to focus on the English right now, and I'll use the Hebrew sparingly, but in the second, about halfway down where it says, let these words that we chant today live firmly in our hearts. Right after that, it says, teach them these words, AKA the Torah, AKA our values, our ways of living. Teach these concepts, these commandments carefully to your children. V'shinantam levanecha. And let them echo in your home, right? Thinking about like all the things that you mentioned that you have in your home, echoing, maybe not even voice, but sight, sound. What are the things in your home that resonate? And when are you supposed to teach this to your children? And we extend that specifically to grandchildren when you are outside the home. So like when you're in the in-between spaces, when you're traveling together, when you're on an adventure together or at an activity, when you go to sleep. How many of you, hand raise, have put your grandchildren to sleep at some point or another? Anyone put their grandchildren? Okay, so what are the ways that we can share story, song, values, how we put our grandchildren to sleep, and when you rise up? And to wear these as a sign and a reminder on your arms and on your forehead. Now, specifically, they're really talking about tefillin. If you've seen those fun little boxes of mystery that have this very text inside of it, but also as we were talking about what we wear our values. Oftentimes there might be, I specifically wore this tonight. This is a necklace that my mother wore that was a present from my dad. This is a legacy piece, and I talk about it to my daughter all the time, of how much my dad loved my mother and how much she loved the color red, and that was a powerful color for her, et cetera. Like, these are the stories that come with these objects. So what we show and see as signs on our body is as important, if not more important, or equally important to any of these other pieces. So I wanted to, and certainly the last piece of marking it on your doorpost, putting up a mezuzah together, the outward signs that Jewish values are important to you. Some of us may feel comfortable having a mezuzah on our doorpost. Some of us may not, but certainly around Passover time, if you're sitting around a Seder and talk about the blood on the doorpost, that is like a direct link to this, right? Mm-hmm. So there's all different ways that, rooted in our tradition, it's literally giving us the manual, the handbook of when, where, how, carefully, with kindness and care, and what are we speaking? We're speaking words of Torah. And when Shul translates the word Torah, we translate that as wisdom, both capital Torah and lowercase Torah, the wisdom of the sages, wisdom of our ages, wisdom of our family. So I wanted to invite us to root this in our tradition as we really think about how we're going to pass these values on to our grandkids. I'm going to move us forward and skip a little bit more of the chat pieces and think about, well, okay, we've heard a little bit about the map of like where and what, et cetera, but what are the Jewish values? How do we identify Jewish values and our own core values? Maybe it's something that we've had passed on from an elder in our life. And maybe we're like, I don't actually know what my Jewish values are. And so we're going to go through a little bit of a process to identify that right now.
We sure are. And lucky for you, if you don't know where your Jewish values are, what your Jewish values are, we're going to introduce you to an unbelievable resource that I am so excited to share with you if you have never seen it before. And it is called the Periodic Table of Making a Mensch. Sarah, I'm actually going to ask you to reshare that slide in just a moment. And there's a lot of text on this slide. We're going to zoom in a moment to take a little tour around. But first, I just want to tell you a little bit about what you're seeing. So
can I do one more disclaimer?
For sure.
We will, in the resource materials that you'll receive after this, there'll be a link. If it's not in there, we'll send you the link that you can access this to.
Yeah. So periodic table of the elements, for any chemists in the room, you certainly know that those are the building blocks of our reality, right? Those are the elements that make up the world in which we live. And so this periodic table is based on two people's work. It is based on, kind of further back, it is based on the work of someone named Rabbi Israel Salanter, who was a teacher in 19th century Russia and Poland, who is often credited as the father of the modern Musar movement. Musar is a discipline of focused contemplation on values and what are called midot, character qualities or traits that we wish to cultivate in ourselves in order to live a better life.
I'm going to interject for one moment and just say the definition of midah is measure. So it's how you are measured or how you're measuring yourself. So midot are, what are the measurements of how to live a good life?
Beautiful. And further on in the 20th century, or maybe even 21st, the filmmaker Tiffany Schlein was the first one, as far as I know, to arrange different kinds of character qualities and traits into a periodic table, which the Foundation for Jewish Camp later readapted as Making Mensches, a periodic table. So there is a request to see if we can share the Jewish values chart in the chat. Deborah, we'll see if we can do that. Again, we'll also send it for sure in the email. But Sarah, if you don't mind just zooming us in a little bit so we can take a quick tour of some of the things that are on this chart. Let's see if that's possible. It may be that we can't zoom in which case, okay. So I will tell you just a few things, and we can actually come out of that, Sarah, and I'll talk through a few things as we also share the resource in the chat. I'm sorry, I want to pull it up as well so I can be talking to you in an informed way. The periodic table is organized in a couple of different columns. There are, do you have it there?
I'm trying.
Thank you.
Okay. I don't know where it went. Hold
well,
on.
I'm going to pull it up one more time. Sorry, everyone.
Open link.
Apologize for that. We got a couple different columns going on here. We've got character traits associated with courage, honor, justice, moderation, transcendence, and wisdom. And some of the values that are reflected here are the values of chesed, of kindness, rachamim, compassion, the value of ahava, love, the value of malchut, wonder, the value of humility, anava, the value of confidence, bitachon. So there's a lot more that you'll see on there, but what we're going to invite you to do in this moment, and apologies for not having the resource quite as visible as we hoped.
Just put the
Great, and the link is in the chat, it looks like, as well. Thanks, Naomi. We're inviting you to look back at your map that you made of what you're already saying, making, showing, and doing, the ways in which you're already transmitting values and tradition to your grandchildren, and take a look at it through the lens of values. What are some of your core values that are most important to you to transmit, that are most important to you that your grandchildren understand about you?
There's another way that I want to invite you to access these pieces, and a lot of these values are things that you think about: humility, courage, etc. So if you were to take one of those things that you're passing down, a tradition, a cultural piece, or whatever, boil it down to what's the essence of that thing. Is that about being a compassionate person? Is that about being a courageous person? Like, maybe there's a couple of core values that are associated with the activity or visual or story that you're telling to your young person. Does that make sense to everybody? So you're going to take the example of the tradition that you shared in your chat, or one of the things that you wrote down, and you're going to sort of boil it down to what is underneath that? What is the value that is actually there? Don't worry about Jewish or not. Just grab hold of what that's really about. Is that about resilience? Is that about kindness? Just kind of grab some key word value words around what that tradition is that you're passing down. Take a second for that.
I mean, Ben,
Yep.
I put in chat or a link to all the slides, which we'll be sending out tomorrow anyway. So our grandparents can click on that link and go to the last slide and see it very large.
Wonderful. Thank you,
Thank
Terry.
you.
Appreciate
Pleasure.
that.
Okay, so maybe if you want to populate the chat right now with any of those core concepts, those core measurements or midot or values that you kind of assessed.
We're seeing a few: tolerance, compassion, and kindness, joyful Judaism, love and kindness, reverence and awe, gratitude, generosity, connection to the Jewish people, trust, honesty, growth, learning, gratitude, love, respect, gratitude, joy, honor, grounded.
Gorgeous.
Wow, how lucky are all of these grandchildren to have all of you as their grandparents?
Hamishness, menschlichkeit. Yes, I love it.
Honestly, it's amazing.
Linda, you wrote to me privately. I don't know if you wanted to share with everybody. You have to change it to the meeting group chat and not to Naomi less. But I'll share. Yours was convictions, creativity. Fascinating.
So we want to take a moment, knowing now that we're grounded in these core values, that these are the undergirding values motivating our actions, and having already mapped some of the things that we're already doing. Take a look at those 4 categories again: what you make together, what you show or how you show your values and tradition, what you say and what you do, how you act in the world. Is there one category that feels like it could use a little extra love? One category where when you're looking at it, you're saying, you know, I'm doing a great job in how I'm, you know, what I'm saying to my grandchildren. I'm doing an awesome job in how I'm acting in the world. I'm realizing my grandchildren and I don't spend enough time making something together. We got to make more food together. We got to make more music together. We got to make more art together. See if you can focus in on one category of the 4 where you'd like to make a bit of an adjustment.
We'll give an example here. So an example is, we get together for Passover Seder, but I want to focus on having like a better or more meaningful Seder, like really passing on that story. And I'm saying Seder because it's coming up. So it's something that's easy to kind of get your hands around. So is there one moment in that Seder that I would like to kind of lean into and make a more meaningful, connected tradition that's going to pass down something that's important to me, to my grandchild? You know, like see if you can get sort of hyper specific. You know, maybe you love baking cookies all the time with your grandchild, and maybe there's a way to both either tell a story through that cookie making that's an important story, tell a story from your childhood of your elders, or a recipe that is passed down, or even like, you know, maybe making them Jewish cookies. Like, make them into shapes and talk about what those Jewish shapes are if they're, you know, young children. So again, get really, really specific. If there's an area that you want to lean into that you're like, I may not have given that area enough attention or love.
With a focus on Jewish, is that right?
So yeah, I think that's what we're aiming for here, is
Okay.
to pass on tradition and whatever that means to you. So nobody's saying you need to get up and pray with them, you know, every morning, unless that's something that you want to do. I think it's like looking at your own Jewish values and stories and traditions and thinking about what it is that's important to pass on in those four different areas.
And so I'm seeing already something emerging in the chat that I think might be good for us to give voice to and do some live coaching and conversation around. A couple of people have shared in the chat, you know, one of the things that's challenging is I don't live in the same city as my grandchildren. And so how might I be connecting with them, perhaps especially if they're quite young? You know, is a Zoom call the way to do it? Are there other ways to connect across that distance? So that's a great question that maybe we can spend a little bit of time noodling on creatively together. I wonder if one of those people that put that into the chat wishes to, if you might unmute and tell us a little bit more, and maybe we can support each other to think of some small tweaks that might help. So one of those folks that spoke, and maybe one that hasn't spoken yet. Would you be willing to unmute and talk with us? Yeah, Susan.
Hi, Susan.
Hello, how are you guys?
Hi.
This is all awesome and wonderful, and ideas I'm not short of. It's how to get them to be put into play, and it isn't really. There's no blame. I'm not kvetching. I'm not blaming, but it's hard to engage the kids on Zoom, and oftentimes my son has, his phone. And it's hard to see on the phone. We're on a laptop or on an iPad, but his, laptop's in the other room, or, he doesn't want it. And so it's hard to compete with the other things when our older grandson's on his own device. He's doing something, so it's hard to get them engaged.
I'm, I imagine I'm seeing nods. I'm seeing a lot of resonance in that pain. That is a pain moment. And I, as a parent of a small child, it also pained me to not be able to have my child focus on her grandmother. That was like a stress point. So there's a lot of pain in these distances, and there's a deep desire for these connections too. So I'm thinking of the things that are coming to me in this moment, and then love to hear what Ben thinks too, are things that might be asynchronous. So for example, if there's some sort of activity where I'm, this is literally off the top of my head, so forgive me, it's not a fleshed out thought, I'm speaking in draft, but if there's like Tu B'Shvat, we just passed Tu B'Shvat, so you take a picture of you pointing to a tree that maybe has a bud on it that might just be coming out at Tu B'Shvat, or giving you a hug around a tree and saying, now I want you to send me one. And it becomes like an exchange. So there are things that maybe could be done asynchronously without as much dependence on, if they're crabby at 4 p.m. and they don't want to get on the Zoom, because what young, kid wants to do that. But there might be some activities. The other piece is just depending on the age. I know one thing that my cousin and his granddaughter did was during the pandemic, so I know it was 100% on Zoom. They read together. They read a book together, like a chapter book together, and then they discussed it. And that was like something that she was really into reading, and he built that. And I will tell you that relationship around that book translated later on into her bar mitzvah ritual, where he gave her book recommendations, and all of the grandparents and everybody there wrote book recommendations.
Mm.
Like, what was a book that was powerful to me that I want to make sure that you read? And so she now has this list of like delicious books. So I think there may be ways to think about asynchronous. You could do a cook-off baking competition at your home and at their home, and you could show each other what you made. And then maybe send them in the mail to each other, because who doesn't love getting a care package? So I'm thinking like, oh, the Zoom is so hard. It's so hard. And you can still develop those relationships with other kinds of activities. Buy an activity kit and do it together at the same time, so you don't have to look at each other, but you're doing an activity together. You know, making a menorah, I'm just, you know, I'm it's late at night. My creativity is not that fast, but what other things are you thinking of, Ben?
I'm thinking too about, Susan, what you said. You said, like, I'm not short on ideas, but there's the question of the execution. And so one thing I wonder, I think all the asynchronous ideas are beautiful ideas in the realm of sometimes being on the phone or on a computer. Might you engage your son ahead of time to think about, can we sort of ritualize the beginning and the ending of this call? Like, what would it be like in the space immediately before the call goes through for you to prep our grandchildren on the other side that like something special is about to happen, and it's not going to be so long, but it's going to be a special moment that requires a different kind of attention. How can I support you in coming up with a ritual around that? I don't know, obviously, your son at all, or how he may or may not be receptive to that, but is there a way to kind of grease the wheels on coming in order to drop into a state of kavanah, of intention together, and then to, you know, lovingly and respectfully say, great, I can't wait to see, like, go back to what you were doing before we got on the phone. I'll see you the next time we do this. But the entrances and the exits might need a little bit of extra care and attention too. And that might be a way to problem solve in the real time. I see
Linda, Linda.
I see a few more hands.
Linda had her hand up, and then maybe Carol.
Well, I just find it really hard because I live in Oregon and my granddaughter lives in Vermont, and my daughter won't ever bring her to Oregon. So she's 5 years old and she's never been to Oregon, and it's really, my daughter doesn't see anything wrong with that. She thinks it's the way it is, you know. But I go to Vermont, but you know, there's only so much I can bring to their house.
Well, guess what? As we shared, first of all, just acknowledging the frustration and pain that you shared. And also, you are a walking story. You're literally a walking story. You're a story of your ancestors. You're a story of what you wear. You're a story of, you know, your whole life. So you're bringing an enormous amount when you go to visit.
And I wonder too, Linda, and you may already be doing this, but I wonder, like, are there pieces of Oregon that you bring with you to Vermont?
Love that.
A, because it's important to you, and B, perhaps it also gets your grandchild in on the urgency to go there, right? Like, as your grandchild gets to know Oregon through the things that you bring, they might also be on their mom's case to say, hey, we got to go to Oregon. And I do also just want to say, I heard you in the pain of that. And I'm sorry that they haven't been to visit you yet. I really hope that they will soon.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I sent her Oregon books and Oregon puzzles and stuff. So she does get that. And when I send cards, I often say about, if you come to Oregon, here's what we'll do, you know, and list things that we can do. It'd be fun for her, but you know, she doesn't read yet.
Yeah. Yeah, but it sounds like you're planting some really, really important seeds, and I'm really hoping that, like that carob tree, they're gonna bear some fruit. Let's see, maybe if we have time for.
I think Carol was next. I'm just saying
more,
we're in this like kind of we're saying it's a coaching mode, but it's really a conversation. You know, it's like, you know, it's the Q&A of the talk show. The audience is allowed to ask us anything that you're thinking about here. So Carol, what's on your mind?
If you have older grandkids, get them into genealogy. One way that they can learn about their history, learn about who they've been named after.
learn about their family members. I taped my mom and my dad a number of years ago before they passed away. One was from Russia, one was from Poland. My grandkids now have the tape and the handwritten notes that my mother-in-law also wrote as almost like a memoir or a history book. So they know where they came from, how they got here, how they got into this country, what they did, how they did it, what happened to them in Europe before they came to this country. And I don't think there's any greater connection than a family tree and genealogy. So just the thought, older kids might be interested in that.
Thank you so much
Absolutely.
for sharing. It's such a powerful idea. And I also want to say, as a, you know, an offering, an extension to that idea is to take that maybe to the next step of how does this then get transmitted to them? So you're sharing those stories, and then how do they grab hold of it themselves? A lot of these teenagers are creators and producers. They like to make music, they like to do visual things and graphic art, and maybe there's a way for them to like take that story and make it their own and create something so that they're getting their hands dirty in that story as well too. We have two more quick questions, so thank you so much for sharing that. It's a beautiful idea. Barbara, hi, are you able to unmute?
I think so.
Awesome.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So my issue is a little bit different, and it's not a complaint because it's, again, just the way it is. My grandchildren live very close to me. My husband and I watch our grandchildren all throughout the week, but my children are so resistant to sharing the stories that they grew up with. They grew up with my parents being part of their lives, and they'll talk about their grandparents, but not about their Jewish lives. It's almost like they deliberately go out of their way to avoid that. So my just this week, my 5-year-old grandson said, "Grandma, are there any chores I could do for you so I could earn some allowance?" So I thought, okay, well, I have my grandmother's photo album, and in those days when my grandmother would put a photo album together, she would cut around the whole picture and tape it in using Scotch tape into a book. So
Yeah.
now we're trying to, my 5-year-old grandson and I are trying to take the pictures out of the book and sort of put them in a more connected, chronological order. So through that, he's learning, like, okay, that's not your mommy, that's her mommy. So who is she? Oh, that's your grandma. Oh, what does she to me? If she's daddy's great grandma, then she's my great, great, very great, like he, and that's how I at least feel like I accomplished something. So there are even ways that we don't think we're really getting the story across and making the connections with our grandchildren. We are. We just have to sometimes go about it through a way that we don't even realize is causing the connection.
It's huge, Barbara. And what you're offering to him is an embodied experience that will encode those names, those faces, and those stories at such a deeper level of awareness. I guarantee
Interesting.
he's gonna remember that in a not just cognitive way, but an embodied way for a long, long time. What a smart choice.
Yeah, so just I mean, and I gave them pictures, like photos of my parents, that
Brilliant.
they should know these are not even thinking that it's their great grandparents necessarily, but they should know that's grandma's mommy and daddy. And and because at the age of 6 and 5, they can't really think too much beyond that. Anyway, thank you so much. This is a great idea for you to have
Concept that
this.
there's a family tree, that is like, it's so gorgeous. It's so gorgeous. Thank you for sharing, Barbara. I think we're at the point where we need to start kind of rounding out the conversation, but these conversations should continue for sure. Like I said, if you loved your little, we talked about, if you loved your little group that you talked with and want to exchange emails, go ahead and private message them. But we're sending you off with some homework to do. We're sending you off, not to tease you, but like we're sending you off with some homework to do. Hopefully this may have sparked a couple areas where you're like, I didn't actually think about that area before, or I didn't think that, if I actually name the value that's associated with what we're doing, that's actually transmitting Jewish values.
And what I'd say around a sort of takeaway out of tonight for yourself is think about a small tweak. And tweak is really the word I want to invite you to consider. I'll give you a real example from my real life. I have gone in and out of having a meditation practice for years. I cannot ever quite seem to actually just get myself to sit down on the cushion for that long, but whenever I am in it, I remember, oh, right, this actually helps me a lot and this feels better. So recently I was like, dang it, I'm out again. I got to get that meditation practice back in. When I thought about it as like, I suddenly have to meditate for 20 minutes every morning, that was completely overwhelming. Where is that going to happen? I can barely get out the door on time as it is. Like, there's no way that that's going to occur. What I ended up doing as a tweak, not a huge change, but a tweak, was I recognized, wait a minute, when I make my coffee in the morning, there is a 2 to 3 minute period where it's kind of dead time. I'm waiting for the coffee to make its way through the coffee grounds into the carafe so that I can pour it into my cup. And usually with those 2 to 3 minutes, I sit on the couch and I just look at my phone.
Mm-hmm.
Could I maybe choose instead, I'm already making the coffee every morning. That's already happening. Can I just tweak the way that I'm using those next couple of minutes and try having some focused intention? And I'll tell you, for the last couple of weeks, it's grown. I'm now up to 6 minutes while my coffee is being made. I'm looking forward to getting to 10, but it's because rather than thinking about a huge change I wanted to make, I focused in on something really specific, measurable, and time bound. And I slotted it in to a moment in my day where I knew that I could actually make a difference. So as you consider the various ideas that may be coming up for you already from tonight of having focused on what you're already doing, but then focusing on these areas where maybe you want to give a little bit more love, or maybe you want to just try something a little bit different. Before you overwhelm yourself trying to change everything, see if you can find the tiniest tweak. Just tweak it and see how it feels, and check in with yourself 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now. I tried tweaking it. How did it go? Did it work? Did it not work? How do I know if it worked or it didn't work? And whether it did, either way, all of that is information to then just keep tweaking the dial. So really focus in on those small moments.
So we want to encourage you to, also think about an accountability partner as well. Maybe there's somebody in your life that you could just share, hey, I'm really trying to do something different. It might be somebody in your home. It might be a friend. I'm trying to do something different. And it will help me to stay accountable on this. If I know that I've said it to you, you've witnessed me, and now you're going to ask me about it from time to time. I'll be like, oh, right. I wanted to work on this. So we encourage you to think about being in a partnership around that. And additionally, Ben and I are available. Terry will share our email addresses. If you want to talk more about this, certainly we're available to you for quick little consults or ideas. But hopefully we'll do some follow-up with other kinds of ways that you might want to dig into some of this work as well too, perhaps with one of our groups that we're working with, in wise aging work that we do at Lab Shul. Also like join us at any time. Like, we've opened doors at Lab Shul. Many of our programs are available online as well too. And Terry can share that with you as well too. But we really feel privileged and honored to have been here. So Terry, I want to turn it back to you to close shop here, and maybe we'll sing everybody out one last time.
Okay, thank you. May I just start with a thank you, Ben and Naomi, for your just your loving partnership. It's been a great joy preparing with you, and thank you for giving so much of your heart and soul to the Jewish Grandparents Network and our community. And we thank you to all our friends. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Look for our follow-up email tomorrow morning, in which we'll include the recording and the slides and how to connect with Ben and Naomi. And again, thank you very, very much for joining us. We so appreciate your presence.